Welcome to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. This show is all about guns, politics, and self-defense, and all those intertwined things to do with firearms. And always have an expert guest on with us. Tonight, we are fortunate to have local attorney Alan Buttell. Been on my radio show a bunch of times, very thoughtful attorney.
Great to be here, Bob. Thank you.
I have to tell you, he's a former Marine, was a Kansas State trooper, and currently a very well-known defense attorney here in Las Vegas, and I appreciate you having you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Bob. Thank you.
We are going to spend this show talking about firearms laws in the state of Nevada, and we've got lots and lots of them here that go through all sorts of the little towns and bypasses that change the laws wherever you want to go in Nevada. One of the issues that the State Assembly is working on this year to perhaps reduce some of the confusion. But first I want to talk about a bill that's in the hopper, a new one from Assembly Leader William Horn that establishes something new in Nevada. What it establishes is a $25 tax on all firearms sales in the state of Nevada. Now, not to be confused with the $25 Brady background check that we have in Nevada, not to be confused with the sales tax we charge in Nevada, but adding a third tax in effect to any transaction involving an over-the-counter sale of a firearm. It seems to me that at the outset, which is why I have you here, Alan, that this thing is unconstitutional, that we're levying a tax on firearms. We have a state constitution, we have a right to keep and bear arms and so forth, but to add a particular tax, just as a merchant, I am looking at this scenario. We sell a $100 rifle, war surplus Nagant or something, and you are selling one also as a private party. You're selling one to your neighbor, I want to sell one to your neighbor. When your neighbor comes in, I'm going to do a Brady background check on him, which costs $25 for the state of Nevada. I'm going to charge him sales tax, $8 on his $100 gun. I'm now going to charge him an additional $25 for what we'll call the horn tax on his gun. Plus, I have the other disadvantage of the Brady system we go through frequently is backed up to 45 minutes or an hour before you can get approval to give you the gun, even though you're a good person and you're going to pass the background check. So I'm going to take an hour more of your time, a lot of paperwork, and charge you $58 more to buy this $100 gun than somebody at the gun show or a private party. There's got to be some interference in commerce here that is got to the point of ridiculous.
Well, I think if you're talking about the same $25 that I'm thinking about, it is a $25 tax that is intended to be earmarked for treatment of mentally ill or mentally challenged people for whatever reason that might be. So I guess the idea that Mr. Horn is espousing is to create a $25 tax placed upon exclusively the gun purchaser for the purposes of dealing with the mentally ill. And I guess my fundamental problem with that is it is just one more form of and tactic to erode the Second Amendment privilege that we have, which is to keep and bear arms. It's funny because the First Amendment doesn't seem to be attacked in the same manner. We have free rights to speak practically anytime, anywhere about anything. And there is no effort ongoing to erode those rights. However, the Second Amendment seems to take a back seat to this First Amendment, and yet I know of no hierarchy of rights. For instance, the First Amendment is more important than the Second and Third and such as that. Right. So first of all, I got a problem with that. and it doesn't treat us equally under the law.
It doesn't. I mean,
And there's no nexus. What is the nexus between a purchaser of a firearm that justifies the tax to be earmarked for the mentally ill? Why aren't we taxing alcoholic beverages? Why aren't we taxing any number of things? Pharmaceuticals. Why aren't we taxing any number of things? There's simply no nexus. If there's a nexus between guns and the mentally ill, there's a nexus between bubble gum and
right.
mentally ill.
The state should take in tax revenue to help the mentally ill, but to earmark it on people who purchase firearms, I believe it adds another cost to their ability to defend themselves. Should somebody break into the house, now the gun costs more. And if they want to tax something particular, maybe they should tax cigarettes. Apologies to all you smokers out there. Why don't we charge 25 bucks a carton for cigarettes? They'd raise a lot more money, but we already do, of course, charge probably that for cigarettes. The issue is attaching one to the other as an earmarked tax, which in past lives we have proven that doesn't really happen when the state does their budget anyway. Things tend to get moved around from where they're going to go. But my issue is with driving up the costs. In other venues, I sit on a board that was started by the Clark County Sheriff to try and keep guns out of the hands of people who shouldn't buy guns, specifically criminals, and looking into ways to defeat criminal purchase of firearms. And in that context, looking at this tax, it will certainly drive more people to buy guns on the street than from licensed dealers. We won't be able to compete with the guy selling on a street corner. People are going to buy guns. They need guns to protect themselves. And to drive the cost up is just wrong. But what I'm saying is it's going to have the reverse effect. It's going to cause more people to become criminals buying guns without the background check, without paying sales tax, et cetera. It'll create an underground economy. And that, I believe, is headed the wrong direction. We're going to end up with more criminals with guns rather than less. Even though we're probably making criminals by forcing them to save money, they're voting with their wallets to buy the gun privately. Let me break for commercials here. So this is a long subject, and we'll be back after these messages. Stay tuned. Hey, we are back here on Fired Up with my guest, attorney Alan Buttell. We're discussing William Horn Assembly Leader's bill to increase the cost of firearms by adding a $25 tax to all firearms sold in Nevada. Has some negative connotations, obviously, with people wanting to buy a firearm for self-defense don't need to be hit in the wallet. I know Mr. Horn is concerned about gun show loopholes and things like that he thinks that's where criminal guns come from, and statistically it's not. Where they've done traces from gun show sales, they found 1.7% of the guns that were purchased at gun shows, or 1% of the crimes are committed with guns purchased at gun shows, but the time to crime from the purchase of the gun to its use in a crime is over 3 years. The people are buying guns from private parties simply because it's less expensive. And we're adding this tax on guns, which I find personally annoying because it's attacking my industry, of course, but on a general sense, I would oppose the same thing if they were taxing anything else. That they pick out an industry and say, we're going to collect for the mentally ill, other than, it's just silly that it's not correct if they need to service the mentally ill, which they do. We need to use general state funds and not earmark gun owners as the persons responsible for that.
I'm just going to say this. I think that Mr. Horn is, I mean, with all due respect, and certainly a good man, but it seems to me that this is wrong on so many levels. We've discussed a few of them. There's so many. But what it occurs to me that Mr. Horn is capitalizing on a national dialogue that started after Sandy Hook. And there was a great deal of discussion about mentally ill and mentally challenged people because they are so often the ones who are using guns to mow down people.
Virtually all of them have had some
And so
mental issue.
I think this is all about Mr. Horn, so that we'll be talking about Mr. Horn. There's simply no relationship between taxing the sales of firearms and stopping what happened at Sandy Hook or gun safety or public safety or anything else. It's simply a tax, and it's a means for Mr. Horn to get his name out in the public. That's what
Hopefully it's a way for Mr. Horn to get himself out of office in the next election.
Well, we're certainly talking about it.
Well, I mean, I'm fired up about this. It's a direct attack on my customers. It's a direct attack on people needing firearms to defend their lives. Crime is rampant. Home invasions, burglaries, robberies happen all the time. And to do anything that would cause people, it's not gonna hit you or me. We can afford $25 for the mentally ill and we want to buy a gun. But it hits the people that are the victims of the crime. It hits the people on the lower income levels. Talk about a regressive tax. He always says, he's against regressive taxes because they cost the poor people more. What could possibly cost poor people more than you're adding a $25 in a lot of cases to buy a self-defense tool? It's a 12 or 14 or 15% tax on them buying that.
And they fundamentally fail to realize that guns are tools. It's like hammers, saws, nails.
Well, saws particularly, we rent those at my store.
They are simply tools. And Mr. Horn and others wouldn't think for a moment to put a $25 tax on the sale of tools.
He'd raise more money.
A gun is nothing but a tool, and you have brought up many times before in our conversations about someone who is not apt to want to carry a gun or use a gun, but they have it in their home because if somebody comes in and is assaulting their wife or their children or something, then they have that tool available to them under those circumstances.
For an extra $25, that is.
Why would we impose that extra burden upon them to protect themselves with that tool? I don't understand.
This thing is ridiculous. There's more to this bill. It gets worse, actually, as we go down the things he's proposing. But we'll get that after the break. We need to stop here for a minute and invest in a little capitalism to keep the show on the air. So we'll be right back. Don't go away. Hey, we are back here on Fired Up. We're talking about the proposed bill that's in the Assembly now, a bill draft resolution that will charge this $25 state fee, a gun tax basically on all firearms sold in Nevada, should it pass, on top of the fact that the state already charges $25 for a Brady background check, which is the state of Nevada charging. The federally, that's not charged for. When Congress passed the Brady bill, they specifically said in the bill that there cannot be a charge for it. The FBI has to do the background checks for free. But states, if they wished, could also run a local check and they could charge for that if they wanted to. So we have already basically a $25 tax from Carson City on guns, the Brady check. Now, I'll grant you, if they have a current concealed weapon permit, they don't pay that fee, but everybody else does. I mean, that is a separate issue, is another stupid fee, because it says that they have ruled that if you have a current concealed carry permit, that we don't have to do a Brady background check and you can save the $25. Who's getting caught in that one is police officers. When a Metro officer comes in, driving his black and white, in uniform, to buy a gun when he's on his break, because he wouldn't do this on duty, we have to run a background check on him for $25 to make sure he's allowed to buy a gun. That's gotten into some interesting discussions with some of the officers because they, for some reason, feel, because they already have a gun and they're a law enforcement officer, Why do we need to check their background? But it's the state law. So anyway, so we're ending up with the $25 background, $25 horn fee, horn tax here, and the sales tax. But there's more to the bill. There's one that we've discussed on this show before, but I really need to hit it again. This also says, because Mr. Horn wants to encourage Brady background checks, that anybody who makes a sale of a gun, who uses the Brady system, who checks to make sure that the guy is Brady'd, that seller of the gun is immune from civil litigation if the buyer misuses the gun. I sell a gun to Fred, and Fred passes the background check, and then Fred takes that gun and shoots your wife. You cannot sue me for giving Fred that gun. I am not liable according to Horn's bill. Does that seem
I think it's
reasonable or legal?
I think it's a noble concept. I don't think there's any question that it sounds good on paper, and anybody would probably, if after thinking about it, would agree. Hey, well, that seems like a good idea, but it's impractical. It's not going to happen. There are unforeseen circumstances that are going to create exceptions to that being a good idea. There's simply no possibility of this bill preventing Mrs. McGillicuddy from suing you, the shooter, and whoever's in the stream for whatever bad act caused her husband to die prematurely. And whether Mr. Horn's bill says ultimately you won't be found liable for it, you're still likely and probably going to be drawn into the suit and have to participate and pay to be there. And if you don't, you got problems.
I can just see a ton of gray area. That I sell the gun to Fred, but Fred was drunk at the time. Or I sell the gun to Fred, and while he was buying it, he said something like, I'm gonna go shoot Alan's wife. And I thought it was a joke, and I ignored it and went, yeah, he's just kidding, and I sell the gun anyway. But that's not covered in Horn's bill. That something else happened in the transaction. Occasionally we have customers come in that say something like that, and we simply don't sell them a gun. Obviously, the liability there would be tremendous. Not only it'd be morally wrong to sell the gun, but according to Horn's bill, as long as I run the Brady check, it's fine. But what if he comes back as an unresolved? We have about 1% of them come back unresolved. Brady has this little section in it where they don't say yes or no. About 1 out of 100 customers we get, they say, we don't know. We'll be right back with the We Don't Know after these messages. Hey, we are back here on Fired Up with my guest, attorney Alan Buttell. Just before the break, we were talking about the Brady system and how this would affect coming in under Horn's tax. We have Brady checks, we run on people and they come back, yes, you can sell the gun, and occasionally they come back, no, you can't sell the gun, but about 1% come back unresolved. What that says to the dealer is there's something in the background that they cannot discover what happened. Usually the guy has a felony arrest from 30 years ago in Podunk, Alabama, and they cannot get a disposition of the case. And the guy say, well, I didn't even get arrested. They're lying, or I wasn't convicted. And after 72 hours, Brady leaves it up to the dealer to decide if he wants to transfer the gun or not. And that varies dealer to dealer. Most of them do transfer the gun. Walmart doesn't, as their company policy. But with Horn's bill, if I Brady the guy, I'm immune from suit. What do I do with the guy that's unresolved? If Brady doesn't give me an answer, is he Brady'd for the purpose of this statute?
I have a question for you. You are the gun dealer in your hypothetical.
Right.
And my only question as the attorney representing the estate of the dead person is, do you have insurance for this?
Probably not. If I can see the insurance company backing out of that. If they say you didn't get a go on that gun transfer.
But you did the
Yeah.
Brady check.
It just says we do the Brady check. It doesn't even say what if he fails, But I assume that'll be in the body of the bill. If he doesn't pass Brady, you can't make the transfer. That's the law.
Well, hopefully when they're testifying and when they're debating this bill, all these flaws and chinks in the armor are going to be revealed, and it will die the death that it deserves.
Hopefully it'll die the death. As I understand it, it's a tax, so it has to be a 2/3 majority of both houses in our legislature to pass it. So hopefully the $25 part will go away. The Brady background isn't a tax, that part of it. So we'll find out when we get there. This is, I can't understand where we're going. What this is aimed at is private parties. And it's aimed at the rest of Horn's bill passing, which says everybody gets Brady'd in every gun transfer. It's to encourage private parties to run Brady's, which hopefully there's some mechanism to have that happen. But there again, the theory is they come into a dealer and we run the Brady for them, but we run into that $25 Brady fee again.
Forgive me, when Bubba is selling his hand iron to the next door neighbor, he's not going to be thinking about any of this.
He's not going to come down to the store
and
show his ID and get Brady.
That's not going to happen. Sorry.
But if we had this law in Chicago, don't you think that would stop a lot of gun crime?
Well, they have
because the gangbangers would all come into dealers and do Brady transfers, get declined, and then not transfer the gun.
I don't know. When you asked that question about Chicago, and I thought, well, with all the laws that Chicago has, and as restrictive as it is, the most restrictive venue in our country,
Basically,
I believe,
can't legally own
and
a
yet they
pistol.
have more murders on an annual basis than anywhere else in the country. I don't think any of these laws are going to make a tinker's dam to anybody, frankly.
Anybody with an IQ above a doorknob will realize that gun laws don't make people honest. Hey, we're coming to the end of our time. I thank you very much for coming on again, Alan.
It's always
a pleasure. You can find us on our website, firedupwithbob.com, or leave comments on our Facebook page, Facebook/firedupwithbob. What else? We'll be back with another show next week. Thanks for viewing. We'll see you again next time.